Good morning here, East Coast Standard Time in the US. Maybe good afternoon if you are joining from Europe, Asia, Africa, Middle East. Who knows? That would be cool. Thanks for joining. I'm Malcolm Hawker, head of data strategy with Prophecy Software, host of the CDO Matters podcast. And today I am CDO Matters Live. It's Friday. Here, we do record these and stick them out on our YouTube channel. So you may be viewing this after the fact, but I'm slightly chipper because it's Friday. So yay, Friday. But I'm also a little lagging because I've had some pretty serious travel this week. I was on the West Coast in literally outside of Disneyland in Anaheim, California. I just say Los Angeles because it's the greater Los Angeles area, but I was out there all week. And just got back late last night, pardon me, after a very fulfilling week at Enterprise Data World. Enterprise Data World, for those who you may not know, was a kind of a, I don't know, I want to say a premier conference in the data and analytics space, and had been around for like 30 years almost, in the mid 20 years, and was this perennial year after year after year thing, Enterprise Data World. I'd been going to it for years, if not decades. And thanks to COVID, it hadn't happened for 4 years. So this was the first conference in 4 years. I just returned from last night. Was given the distinct honor of having 2 speaking slots, which is really cool. Enterprise Data World is hosted by the good people at Dataversity. CEO Tony Shaw and his team always put on a great event. So they put on the DGIQ, Data Governance Information Quality events as well. They put on 2 of those a year, West Coast, East Coast, and they do it, Enterprise Data World. And they always do such a good job. Food is actually something you want to eat, which is a nice change, particularly this time. So we were at a Westin hotel, a resort hotel, in Anaheim. And I don't know, it's funny because I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I saw Anaheim, and I've been to Anaheim multiple times on business. There's a reasonable number of fairly big companies that are based there, and I'd been for a number of client meetings over the years at Anaheim, and I was like, okay, yeah, Anaheim, home of the one of the baseball teams, the Angels, and also home of Disneyland. But I didn't put 2 and 2 together. And I roll up on the resort, and it's literally across the street from Disneyland, which isn't itself a bad thing. It's fine. Actually brings a bit of a unique energy to a hotel experience, because you get in the elevator, and there you are, Mr. Business Dude, and you're going to a conference, and you got your conference badge on, and you're ready to go. And then the elevator just loads up with all these kids that are going to Disneyland, and they're just like they're just like so amped up and so pumped up. And honestly, I thought it was kind of fun with all the kids with their regalia and their mouse ears and everything else. So I thought that was a lot of fun. But anyway, before going to the conference, I was like, hey, it's happening at Anaheim, and I didn't even think that it would be like anywhere remotely close to Disneyland. And like I said, it turns out it was like across the street. I could actually hear screams from the roller coaster from my room. But thankfully, Disneyland closes at a reasonable hour every day, and it wasn't going until all hours of the evening. But I could absolutely hear the screams, which also led to a bit of a unique business experience when there are people like literally screaming from outside your room. But anyway, so that's Enterprise Data World at Anaheim. First time in 4 years, well executed, well-oiled, well-run event. Thank you, Tony and team, for putting on a great event. Key takeaways. What would some of the key takeaways be from the last 3 days at Enterprise Data World? Well, geesh, where do I start? First and foremost, just high level, there is absolutely positively, for lack of a better word, a huge thirst for events in the data and analytics space. That's abundantly obvious. Early on, Prophecy did sponsor the event, so we were kind of given privy to some of the numbers that we would expect to see, of course, because we were sponsoring, and I think that they were talking early on about 400 people attending. It turns out there was like well over 600, which is great. But people are engaged. Like all the conferences I've been to recently, like usually you kind of, this with the exception of Gartner. So Gartner, this absolutely happens where it's like the 2 or 3 day conference. The morning of day one is well attended, and then after lunch and day one, things start to decline and dribble down. That happens at Gartner all the time. By the end of a Gartner event, there's like nobody there. But with the DGIQ event that I went to in San Diego, with this event, the Dataversity event, and partially this is because they bookend the event with kind of workshop-y and professional certification, CDMP certifications, Certified Data Management Professional. I should probably know that. But they kind of bookend at this 2-day conference, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, with these other workshops. But people stick around, and they like stick around till the end. Right, so we did a keynote closing panel yesterday, from 4:30 to like 5:30, and the room was packed. So people are engaged. People are going to events. There's a thirst in the data and analytics space to be participating and to gain information and to gain insight. So that's a really good thing. Like every other event I've been to this year, and this is a common theme, and this is great. So many first-time attendees, which is wonderful. That there are more and more people coming into our space that are coming into the world of data that are thirsty and hungry for these insights that you can get, and for the networking and collaboration that you naturally get at these things. So that's a good thing. Now, it does make me wonder, kind of like the other side of that coin is do we have a lot of turnover? Because I think that's a natural conclusion you could make from this as well. And I think the answer may be yes. This is obviously just kind of quantitative and not a scientific approach to data. But I suspect a certain degree of this has to do with turnover, and I guess that's probably natural. But again, a lot of, and I certainly saw this at the CDO IQ conference in Boston. Most certainly saw it there, but I saw it again over this week. A lot of kind of first-time data leaders, a lot of people who are in CDO and data leadership positions who are mid-career. Again, great stuff, awesome. That's kind of fresh perspectives, new folks coming into the field. But given the fact that a lot of these folks are, what I would call mid-career, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's what's fueling a lot of the thirst here, a lot of the hunger for these insights that you can get from these conferences, because a lot of these people are new to data and analytics. That was one of the questions that was asked early on in the conference, like who's kind of new to this and who's just kind of starting out on this. And there was, I would say, probably 20% of the room hands went up, which again, that's great. It means people like me who talk about best practices and insights and tips and tricks and all the other things that you should be doing. That's good for people like me, and it's good for the Dataversities of the world, and it's good for the industry, I think, writ large. So that's kind of like high level. People are going to conferences, they're excited, they're there, they're engaged, they're taking notes, they're asking questions. So these are all really good things, especially at a time of kind of economic uncertainty. I mean, it's kind of at a macro level, we live in interesting times when people are talking about, possible recessions or slowdowns, or certainly the cost of capital has increased. Obviously, we're all experiencing that with higher interest rates. But companies are still paying to send people to these events, right? Because it's been full rooms at every event that I've gone to, and I've gone to lots, and I will be continuing to go to more. I got a really busy schedule coming up, folks. Hopefully the old corpus here holds up over the next 2 months, because I am pounding the road. This week, LA. Next week, I'll start here in Florida from where I live, Chicago, Toronto, ending the week in my hometown of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So that's next week. I will be in Florida, Chicago, Toronto, and Edmonton. And that's just between Monday and Friday. And that's just next week. The week after that, I'm off to London and Munich. So, which is, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. But it certainly obviously can be relatively draining to do all of that. But it is honestly my honor and my privilege to be able to do that and to be having conversations with data leaders around the globe, because that's my credibility base. That's how I know what's going on out there. That's how I know what matters to you and matters to other people. So it's literally my honor to do that. But if you've traveled at all, you know, it can certainly be draining. So enough about me. Key takeaways from the event. Well, number one would be semantic layer is the new black. Semantic layer, semantic layer, semantic layer. Boy, if I had a nickel for every time I heard the phrase semantic layer, I'd probably have enough for an entry pass into Disneyland. Don't quote me on that, because I think Disneyland passes are extremely expensive, but semantic layer. Wow. I'm not entirely sure most people really kind of have a consistent view on what that means. Semantic layer is kind of taking on a little bit of like data mesh type lore here, in that it means different things to different people based on where you are and based on your experience and your knowledge and your level. And everybody's got a different kind of definition of what a semantic layer is. I certainly do. And we can talk about that a little bit more. But that was the two-word phrase of the conference, semantic layer, which I think is kind of a natural progression. We've been on a slow boil here for a while, if you ask me. Because 3-4 years ago, we were talking a lot about graph. Now, I don't think anybody at the time even really kind of knew what graph was. Most people assumed that it was a way of storing data, which it most certainly is, but it's also a way of analyzing data, which is where the kind of the real secret sauce and the value, I think, of graph is. And also, it's an analytical paradigm that can be integrated into other paradigms like AI. We'll talk about that some more. But graph 3-4 years ago is what everybody was talking about. And now I think we've progressed out of graph as a context into, oh, how might I actually operationalize this stuff, this graphy stuff? And that's leading us to conversations about a semantic layer. And I think, putting on my magic forward-looking hat, I think in another year, well, that progression from graph to semantic layer to what I think we're going to see is data fabric. That's just me. And if you guys follow me, you listen to me, you probably know by now that I'm bullish on the data fabric for a lot of different reasons. But I think this is a natural progression. But here we are, semantic layer. Really kind of, I'd say there's two schools of thought here, roughly. Kind of old school semantic layer. This is a way of linking schemas or tables together as part of an analytical workflow, right? Like I want to enable, a consistent, I want to execute a single SQL statement and have that pull against multiple customer tables or multiple account tables, and where the semantic layer is kind of abstracting query complexity and linking those tables, often as a part of an analytical flow, often even in stream as a part of the creation of a dashboard or insight or some sort of downstream consumption of that. That's what a semantic layer has historically always been, if you ask me. Very centered on analytical processes, very centered on the linking at a schema or table level. This is one of the key differences with semantic layers and MDM, by the way. Semantic layers are doing it at a schema level, and MDMs are doing it at record and field level. And by it, I mean linking, connecting, right? So that's kind of old school, what semantic layers have kind of always been, at least for the last half dozen years-ish or so, since they've been kind of in our lexicon in the ecosystem. So that's semantic layer classic. Then over here, you have people like me and a handful of others, including my new friends from Enterprise Knowledge, who gave a great presentation on their use cases that they've been supporting with the semantic layer work that they've been doing through that consultancy. So if you do have access to the recordings for Enterprise Data World, that's certainly one that I would recommend you check out. But there are folks like me, folks at Enterprise Knowledge, other people, including Gartner, my friend Mark Beyer, others at Gartner who are talking about semantic layer V2, semantic layer future state, where it's not just an abstraction of sources, right? Like that's kind of that's like a light data fabric. That's what most people think of when they hear data fabric. I suspect is that it's this way of just kind of magically linking everything, maybe even a new form of data virtualization, as it were, which it is that. But the kind of the future state of the semantic layer, of the fabric, shall we say a semantic layer enhanced fabric. Maybe that's too much. It's like saying like a fish infused fish. But a future state here is where it's not just that data virtualization, but it's actually integration of AI and ML, some form of, let's call it a co-pilot, maybe. There's some application there that is going to be the future state semantic layer that integrates, that allows data virtualization, that breaks some of the barriers, the walls between these data sources, but also integrates insights coming from knowledge graphs, insights coming from ML related processes that are running on metadata. Okay. So this is what Gartner would call the activation of metadata. And if you want my insight on the data fabric, I did an episode of CDO Matters about a month ago. I called it Data Fabric Demystified. And I would welcome you to check that out, where I go into more details here. But this future state semantic layer is really kind of, for lack of a better word, a really high-powered brain. And I hate to use that word, but I will. Especially since artificial intelligence is involved here, that is helping data to classify itself and govern itself. Now, we can kind of peel the onion here. At the base of this semantic layer is most certainly kind of integration capabilities and the ability to kind of look holistically across a data ecosystem and be able to consume extremely large volumes of data, whether that's through a single query, or whether that is through aggregated queries, or whether that is an AI or ML-based process that is doing this across a highly heterogeneous data environment. There's that. But sitting on top of that is advanced levels of analytics. Okay, this is where knowledge graphs are running. This is why AI and ML are churning through a lot of that data. Then on top of that, I see in the future, the semantic layer will include data management capabilities, not unlike what you see today in data quality or MDM, or even data integration tools, where you can manage business rules for both the analytical consumption of those insights, right? And building reports, dashboards, whatever it is, but also operational consumption of that data, where conceivably in real time, you could have business applications that are deferring to the data fabric for things like MDM, right? Something we've been doing for a long time, but we're in real time now. In real time, a CRM application or an ERP application would be able to consume insights from a data fabric, consuming insights and contributing insights to that fabric. That's the future state fabric. That's the future state semantic layer. I would say it exists at level 1. It exists on that kind of data virtualization level. That's what Microsoft has built. That is the Microsoft fabric. That is, I would say that's at level 2 or level 1, pardon me, that level 1. Level 2 is starting to exist. So this is the presentation that I'm calling out from my friends at Enterprise Knowledge. They gave a presentation on how they built some extremely valuable insights at that second layer of a semantic layer, the semantic layer cake, as it were, where they have implemented ML, implemented knowledge graphs, where they're looking across extremely large data sets that historically, for example, in MDM, we've just completely ignored because there's limitations in the compute that we've had historically because we haven't had things like AI and LLMs and those types of things. So there's work happening at that second layer. The third layer doesn't even exist yet. I would argue it doesn't exist yet. It exists in pieces, MDM, data quality, data integration, data cataloging. And yes, data catalog would sit at the bottom as well. But at the top, there would be a governance layer, governance rules that are actually being managed and enforced within a semantic layer. So not only is a data catalog kind of doing what data catalogs do, but it's also managing a complex set of business rules. So I would argue layer one, it's there in early stages. Layer two, starting to evolve through highly bespoke, highly customized, very unique engagements where, whether it's a consultant or whether it's a company, doesn't matter, that are kind of finding ways to piece all of these bits of the puzzle together, where it's not just MDM, it's not just data quality, it's also graph, it's also AI, it's also ML, all of these things together to develop those deep levels of insights for complex use cases like KYC, know your customer, complex use cases like fraud detection, others, maybe even a customer 360 use case, but in an extremely large enterprise with a lot of data. Think of one of the top 5 banks in the world, perhaps. So that exists. And then the third layer doesn't really even exist. Gartner calls that third level. They have a thing for it now. It's called the Data and Analytics Governance Platform that includes anywhere from 70 to 120 different vendors, none of which I would argue even fully align to the definition of that space, which is interesting because I think Gartner is just basically trying to will the creation of a new market segment because they've created a definition for a solution that doesn't exist and probably won't exist for multiple years, but so be it. I was involved in that. My name was on the first instantiation of that market guide, the Data and Analytics Governance Platform market guide. It'll evolve over time because I think it will have to, where there's this new thing that is managing the definition of governance policies, the enforcement of governance policies that's heavily augmented, meaning taking insights from AI, ML, from knowledge graphs to help inform better data management decisions, both for analytics and operational uses of data. This last bit, I think, got me into maybe a little bit of trouble in a closing keynote panel that I participated in, where we were talking about AI. Of course, we were talking about AI because this is topic number 2. Can't go to a conference these days without talking about AI. But number 2 was AI. But I got myself into a little bit of a pickle, I would say, where I was talking about AI and people. The topic was, what questions can metadata answer? And the real answer to that question is, well, just about anything. Just about anything. But where we were talking about the use of AI in the context of what can metadata do for you, basically. And I answered the question by basically saying, hey, I think the world is going to turn. I'm paraphrasing myself now after not nearly enough coffee this morning and a long flight yesterday. But I'm kind of paraphrasing myself, and basically what I said is that we're going to be able to turn the world upside down, and we'll completely change how we approach data quality, from mostly kind of what I was saying. And basically what I was saying is that we'll be able to define data quality through the lens of business outcomes instead of deterministic data quality rules. And I think for a lot of people, that was like what in the hell is he talking about? Because I looked at the audience, and some people who are pretty darn smart were looking at me like, dude, what are you saying? Right? Like, what does that even mean? Like, data quality through the lens of business outcomes. And I didn't finish my thought because I kind of got struck when I didn't finish my thought when I was on the keynote panel because I was struck by the fact that I was clearly speaking gibberish in front of a few hundred people. And I should have finished my thought by saying, hey, I see metadata living as a part of this deeply integrated, deeply powerful, deeply insightful semantic layer that will support and enable data management from an analytical and operational perspective, and that data quality issues or issues that we today perceive as data quality issues will simply be abstracted away. And that we'll be able to look at a data fabric and say, hey, are the business processes here actually running? Right? Are they successful? Are we sending invoices? Are we recognizing revenue? Are we onboarding new customers in a fast and efficient way? Right? Are we doing the things that the business needs to do? Even in situations where there might be two records that have slight differences between them, Acme Inc. and Acme Co. Today, that's a red flag. And it's like, okay, this is breaking the rules. This is low quality data. Tomorrow, maybe if the business processes associated to them say, well, no, it's fine. Everything executed fine. The business processes ran just fine. The government, the customers received their goods. The revenue was recognized. The snail mail got sent, whatever it is. And that could be a different perspective. And if the business outcome was fine, well, then maybe the data is good enough. Still recognizing that from an analytical perspective, we may need to resolve some of those differences, and that's fine. But we wouldn't necessarily be going around waving our fingers saying, hey, that data was sucked. That's kind of what I meant. But, well, that's exactly what I meant. But I think I failed to tell my story effectively with the panel. So semantic layer was the buzz of the conference. And I think that's exciting. Note, however, in the presentation that I've referenced twice now from our friends at Enterprise Knowledge, the presenter asked how many people here have actually operationalized the semantic layer. And out of a room with about 50 people in it, 2 raised their hand. So obviously, we are in the early adoption phase here. And I think that's a good thing because there's a lot of work we need to do within the data and analytics community to fill in those blocks of the layer cake. But there is much goodness here, people. There is much goodness because I think if we can figure this out, I think we can finally, and I don't mean this glibly. I honestly and truly mean this. I think we can solve for the common language problem. Because when you plug AI or an LLM into that model, right? The language of business is a language. And this is something else I said in the closing keynote that, again, I think there was a lot of head scratching. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm trying to run some reports in Tableau and this dude's talking about business processes. Business processes are a language. Quote to cash, right? Onboarding customers, KYC, procure to pay. I mean, pick your pithy slogan. These are largely languages, I would argue. And I think that when we tune small language models or specifically developed LLMs based on these languages, where we say, hey, this is the language we're trying to figure out. We've kind of got a baseline here of LLMs to figure out the English language, and we seem to be doing okay with that. But there are kind of these dialects, shall we say, of language that are highly repetitive, that are easy to guess, that are being fueled by data. When we do that, I think a lot of the differences in things like data quality or data structure or even data definitions can largely be abstracted away. If we can build infrastructure that abstracts the difference between Cassandra and graph or a relational table, we can build an interface that abstracts the differences between nuances in how data is defined or structured or labeled. I believe this. So that to me is solving the common language problem. And that's what I think the future is. And that's where I think a role that AI will play. And this is topic number 2, of course, AI. Can't get away from AI. Topic number 2. There's an interesting kind of, what's the word here? There are people like me who are like all in, like, let's go, horses out of the barn. I'm running through the field trying to chase the horse. And I think it's a good horse. And I think that there's like just nothing but goodness here, just like awesome stuff. Let's go, let's automate, let's augment, let's use AI. And I think it could be transformational. I know it will be transformational in our space. I spoke with a lot of people this week who are like, it's just this thing that's figured out how to string words together. And that was a common refrain, by the way. That wasn't just one person. This was a common refrain, right? And it always comes back to, oh, well, it hallucinates. right? And can you trust it? And how do we trust it? And this is and thinking and positioning AI through the lens of, well, this is how it works today. This is how it's always going to work. And this is always we can't trust it. And it's just this machine that has figured out, it's basically a parrot, right? That has figured out a way to string words together in a cohesive manner. But that's really not that groundbreaking. It's kind of what I heard multiple times. And I find that to be really interesting, because like the ability, like learning through stringing words together, isn't that kind of how we learn to speak? Right? Like, and if you kind of put things on a spectrum, right? Like if you go from learning to speak in development and becoming a human, and then we get to the point of like self-awareness, and then we get to the point of novel problem solving and creativity, right? The thing that really makes us human, right? If that's on a spectrum, let's say 1 to 10, and let's say 5 is we can hold conversations, right? And we can hold coherent conversations, and we can write proficiently, and we can read proficiently, and we can make a proficient argument. We're like, that's maybe 5 out of 10. And the other 5 is the hard stuff. That's creativity. That's novel thought. That's all the things that make us human. Well, we've already got to 5. And they're working to get to the next 5 to 10, called AGI, generalized artificial intelligence, which is like, that's the Skynet stuff, and where machines are actually novel, creating kind of novel thought. They're being creative. We're not there yet. Maybe. Sam Altman, the creator of OpenAI, actually says that we may be there. He just doesn't know. Because if the machines became sentient, would they tell us they were sentient, or would they hide? Chew on that. Anywho, let's assume that we're only halfway there. That's still like this is a little more than just like a parrot that is stringing words together. This is a little more than a parlor trick here, and that's pretty clear, because already AI writes better than us. It appears to make arguments better than us. I mean, so I saw these two schools of thought on display this week, and that was interesting, because I would caution anybody from thinking that this is just like this flash in the pan parlor trick, and that we'll always need people, and we will always need stewardship, and we will always need human driven processes. Because if you ask me, again, these are languages that are highly, highly, highly repetitive. The stuff that our businesses do is highly repetitive. And frankly, when you model it, unless you're like building a rocket ship, right? Like, I would argue, are not that complex. Just my opinion. I guess I should probably speak to some of the questions here. I'm going to be honest, folks, and tell you, I know I'm live on LinkedIn, and I'm on my LinkedIn event page, and I have yet to figure out how to actually access the comments live on LinkedIn. So I'm not seeing the comments live on LinkedIn. I find that fairly interesting, but I am seeing them through our recording platform of Goldcast. Oh, hey, Ron, thanks for joining. So Mark can go to Disney with the prophecy shirt. Never know who's. That's exactly right. Yeah. Fun fact. And I will get to my key takeaways here. Have you ever wondered what the circumference of Disney is? You probably haven't. Because unless you're like a dork like me, I can tell you it's 3.5 miles. How do I know? Because I walked around it. I did a circle around Disneyland. A day one when I was like really jet lagged, and I needed to find a way to put myself to sleep at 7:30 p.m. I walked around Disneyland, 3.5 miles, FYI. What is the influence of LLMs for semantic layer? Oh, Kayla, thank you so much for putting the stuff into Goldcast. That's super helpful. Andreas, what's the influence of LLMs for semantic layer? ChatGPT help you interact with data and provide a practical semantic. Yeah, I mean it's twofold, right? It's the chat interface, right? But it's also the ability to process and analyze data through that lens of an LLM, to interrogate data in a way that we've never really been able to interrogate data in a human kind of natural language way of interrogating data. For example, what's master data? What data is widely shared? What is person A's relationship to person B? But you can abstract that up, right? Even into things like data governance policies, right? Who should have access to this data? And I know people are like maybe we shouldn't give that to a machine, but they could certainly suggest, right? Doesn't mean we need to listen to them. But I mean, when I think about, here's another one. When is data accurate? What are the conditions under which data is inaccurate? Is this customer record accurate? What percentage of our customer records are accurate versus inaccurate? When you define accuracy through the lens of successful business transactions, that's what I meant in my keynote. If you were there, that's what I meant. So yeah, like ChatGPT, but I don't think it's going to be ChatGPT. I think it's going to be chat procure to pay, or chat marketing, or chat ERP. I think we're going to get to a point in the future where it's like we have models specifically built for business, the optimization of business processes. When we do that, I think we limit the hallucinations. The hallucination problems just go away, I think, right? People at the conference and in my keynote panel were talking about, well, you need to become a prompt engineer. And I'm like, this is a short-term problem we're going to fix, right? The fact that you have to be really good at prompts to get the answer you want is a function of the fact that today's LLMs have modeled everything. It's everything. It's the human language, and every nugget of information and every nugget of knowledge out there on the internet, to the degree that it's a source of knowledge. That's a huge dartboard. That's a huge target, right? And it's no doubt that we have to constrain our queries to get specific results from this thing that could be anything. Oh, and by the way, it also has free reign on creativity, right? Because that's what we've tried to mimic humans and be creative. So that's it, right? So there's like no constraint on creativity. But we could build a model in the future that was highly focused on specific business processes where we put constraints on, maybe through the training data set, maybe through the algorithms that are used to tune the AI, right? So we put the constraints there so we don't have to do that from a prompt perspective. So there was a time, I'm old enough to remember, you used to have to hand type in an IP address into a browser window. That's where I think we are. Like, this is a V1 product. We're going to get over the whole hallucination thing. We're going to get over like me needing to be a prompt engineer. I mean, that is so classic early stage problem, right? Like, oh, well, you need to be very specific in what you ask, and you need to become a prompt engineer. Like, if I'm going to well, one, I would not send anybody to prompt engineering school, because this problem is going to be solved. Trust me on that. There's so many analogs here to the early days of the internet, and I was around for those. We're going to figure out this problem, and it's going to be a function of how we train these LLMs, how we train the data that is used and the algorithms that use to go in them. Yes, there'll be plenty of money there. Companies are going to run towards this stuff, and they'll figure it out. But yeah, there will be some sort of Copilot-like interface as a part of that layer cake that I was talking about, most certainly. Do you think that, Ron asks, welcome back to Canada. Yes, I will be in Canada. I'll be in Edmonton next week. Hopefully it's not snowing. And yes, it can be snowing the first week of October in Edmonton. Trust me on this. Do you think a best practice is source MDM, semantic layer, source? Oh boy, hold on. I may have to put on my glasses. I'm thinking source to MDM to semantic layer. So would you put an MDM between sources in a semantic layer or on top of, is basically what you're asking. I need to think about that some more. I in the future, Ron, I think MDM and semantic layer fuse, because an MDM is a semantic layer. It's what it is. MDM allows you to enforce consistent definitions for a certain subset of data. Semantic layers are linking everything, right? Or you can, right? I would argue a lot of the use cases for semantic layers are identical to MDM use cases. And a lot of the companies that are using semantic layers aren't using MDM just because you have a lot of people from an analytics perspective that are driving the bus. And they're not data management people, they're analytical people. And they're solving analytical problems, and they don't really kind of think about operational uses of data. So, anywho, MDMs are semantic layers. Let me be clear on that. So I do see a future where the artist currently known as semantic layer and MDM kind of comes together. So I guess I'm kind of dodging your question. I think today You could have an MDM sit on top of a classic semantic layer where you are maybe using that as a single query engine to pull data out of account tables or customer tables or vendor tables or supplier tables in an easy way. But you could do that with an integration layer. Today, semantic layers are just basically kind of sitting out here for analytical use cases, and MDMs are sitting out here for operational use cases and analytical use cases. But I see these worlds coming together because they have to. Dan Everett. Again, thank you, Kayla, for getting the questions. Hi, Dan. So good to see you this week and to meet your son. That was awesome. Dan V2. It seems like there is a convergence of AI semantic layer. Could you value virtualization knowledge graphs? Yes. Yes. There's a convergence. I mean, we're talking years here, folks, because companies have a lot of money invested in these solutions. And the convergence doesn't necessarily need to be a physical one, but they certainly need to be connected, right? This is prophecy strategy in the Microsoft Fabric. So we are deeply integrating into the Microsoft Fabric, deeply integrating to Purview, deeply integrating into the Azure Data Factory, deeply integrating into, the entire enchilada, the Synapse connectors, you name it. There are others like your former employer, which would say, well, we're going to do it all because we've got every piece of the puzzle. Dan's former employer is Informatica, FYI. So yeah, there can still be best of breed in there, but the best of breed solutions need to be playing well with each other, right? So if I'm a data catalog and you got to figure out how to insert name here, doesn't matter, insert name here, data catalog vendor, there's plenty of them out there. You got to find a way to play well with others quickly and to do it in a kind of in a highly deeply integrated world, because the Microsofts have an advantage, I would argue, because they also own the infrastructure layer. So, anywho, yeah, thanks for the question, Dan. So nice to see you this week. Will it be the data knowledge layer? This is Ron asking. Will it be the data knowledge layer that will bring all these to benefit business? Yes. Yes, some sort of something that Gartner is calling the data and analytics governance platform. Years and years away from fruition. And again, this doesn't need to be a single thing, but it certainly needs to be a collection of capabilities, including MDM, including data quality, including data integration, including data catalog. But all these things are certainly coming together. And somebody like Microsoft, I don't want to make this sound like an advertisement, but I mean, when Microsoft invests a lot of money into something, there's something to look at. And they're investing a lot of money in their data fabric, a lot. Amazon and Google are in massive catch-up mode. I'm not even sure they're going to want to go there because they don't own the application layer either, which is another advantage that Microsoft has. Business user applications. They've got Dynamics, right? They've got an ERP. They've got a CRM. So, but yeah, they're all coming together. Now, again, it doesn't have to be one size fits all, this Swiss Army knife that does everything. I think you could make a very valid business case that you still want to have best of breed, but that best of breed needs to plug in. That's for vendors out there. Thanks, Kayla, for putting the questions in Goalcast. That's super, super helpful. So that was number 2, AI. And there's like these two worlds of thought out there, which is like, it's, flash in the pan, just this super smart parrot. And I couldn't disagree more. Anywho, number 3, data products. Data products. We heard about this a lot at CDO IQ. We certainly heard this a lot at the other Dataversity events so far this year. Data products is coming up. But again, this is another one where it's kind of pick your definition. BYOD. Bring your own definition of data products. And Dan and I were in a presentation on data products. It was very helpful and very good. I think data management people like me, but I think writ large data management people and data and analytics people still don't get the necessity and the importance and the criticality of the integration of product management disciplines into data management. That's what this is about, folks. It's not about slapping a label on it and saying you're now a data product owner. I think to a certain degree, the data mesh has done us a disfavor here, because you can slap a label on it and you can try to enforce governance on this highly federated product, dashboard, report, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But that doesn't really change anything that we've been doing. It doesn't. It doesn't. We've been doing data marts for decades. We've been federating analytics for decades. We've been trying to push governance ownership to business owners for decades. So putting a new label on it and saying you're now the data product owner, it's not enough. It's not enough. What we need to do is hire product managers and ask them, hey, product manager, what would you do differently? If your product is a dashboard, a report, an API, a schema, a data marketplace, I don't care, right? If you are now the product manager responsible for these things, tell me, because you're an expert in this. I'm a data management person. I'm a data quality person. I don't know anything about product management, but that's why I'm hiring you. Tell me, product manager, what would you do? Well, the product manager would describe things like developing a product strategy that aligned to your data strategy, that aligned to your business strategy. He or she would tell you things about like data product lifecycle management. They would do things like ROI analysis. They would do things like interface deeply and collaborate extensively with customers. Yes, customers, to understand what they need and the problems that they're trying to solve. All of these things have nothing to do with governance. Nothing. Now, I can hear you saying, wait a minute, shouldn't they? A data product manager should most certainly be giving governance requirements to a governance committee, to somebody responsible for governance for the for the components that will go into that data product, because maybe it straddles multiple domains. Maybe it straddles product domain, customer domain. Who knows? Maybe it's multiple dashboards. Maybe it's even his data marketplace. The data product manager is a customer to governance. They don't own governance. So I would urge you, data leaders, please, if you're thinking about data products, find a way to hire a product manager, a data product manager. And remember, that role is not a governance ownership role. Governance is happening somewhere else by other people. Product managers are good at product management. They will be a consumer of governance. They will be a customer to the governance process. They will not own the governance process. Thank you so much, Dan, for pointing that out during that presentation. Andreas, data contracts. Ooh, data contracts. Yeah, maybe a semantic layer in legacy now. Maybe reach semantic. Sorry, that's a really long question. I'm not going to repeat. I'm going to try to summarize. Yes, Andreas, I think your comments are accurate. The semantic layer, in many ways, is a not a physical thing. It is a logical thing. I know I painted a picture of it being physical, but I think your point is that it will logically exist within an enterprise, and that's something you actually heard if you were at Enterprise Data World and you went to the presentation that was very focused on this. That's what they would have, the presenters, Joe and Lilith, would have said. They would have said, hey, a lot of these pieces already exist. It's just finding a way to bring them all together. So yeah, I think it's more of a logical thing than a physical thing, even though I know that I kind of painted a physical picture. Cool questions. So that was data products was topic number 3. I would urge people again to divorce governance from product management. These are 2 separate things. What else was talked about? Oh, data modeling. It's interesting. I keep hearing, data modeling is the new black and data modeling is back. It went away and now it's back. I find that curious, but a natural outcome of the growth of AI and a natural outcome of a lot of people who are very good at data modeling, or at least say they're good at data modeling, and a lot of people like data architects and data engineers, where that's a big part of their job. And I'm seeing a lot of people pushing back and saying, okay, well, data modeling and now is the new black, and it's back, and it never went away, and it's something we need to do, and it will always be people, and it will always be people. But I got to be honest and say, well, first of all, I don't want anybody to lose jobs to AI, including me, by the way. I asked ChatGPT like the top 5 questions that I used to receive as a Gartner analyst, and its answers were pretty darn good, like 70 to 80% good. The 20% it was missing was the experience and the real world experience, separate. But I don't want anybody to lose a job from AI, including me. So let's be honest about that. I want to see us redeploy these skill sets and redeploy these assets and redeploy resources to solve other and new, novel and more creative problems, right? So my hope is that AI will make us more productive, and the people will be able to focus their attention on other things, maybe even including me. However, I think some of what's the right way to say this, vitriol around data modeling is basically kind of a way of saying, hey, I don't want the AI to take my data modeling job. And I don't think the AI can take my data modeling job because I add things that AI cannot. That may be true. That may not be true. What I hear, the subtext of the kind of the data modeling pushback, the kind of the story under the story, is data architects and smart people know how to abstract the business in the best way, right? And that's what the data modeling at its core is this representation, the physical instantiation from a data perspective of how the business operates, right? And me as an architect, as an expert, as an artist, maybe even, I think there's a certain degree of creativity here. I do that way better than any AI could ever do. That's what I think is kind of at the core here. And a lot of people just aren't really saying that, but I just said it. And that's natural. It's to be expected, right? If that's the core of what you do, and you've got other people out there saying, well, just let the AI do the modeling, your natural reaction is going to be, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a good idea. So in the short term, it's both, right? I think we can use AI to do data modeling for things that are of lower value or less impactful. We should already have within enterprises some concept of some data is worth more than others. Master data, shared data, the literal connective tissue of an organization. That data is worth a little bit more than others. Maybe for that lower value data, the modeling there can be more automated, and where you have human involvement and engagement in doing things like a supply master, a customer master. But I do see a future here. Pardon me. I do see a future where a lot of data modeling is automated, because the assumption here is that humans can always do it better. I'm not sure that's true. We can debate that, but what I do know is they can't synthesize nearly as much data as AI can. There's no way they can. Our brains are limited, right? AI can churn through petabytes of data to develop an insight, to develop a model, meaning the scale that AI can operate at, the depth of insight that it can operate at, to create a model far exceeds what we could ever do. So basically what we're saying is that the subconscious ignoring, for lack of a bit, it's not ignoring. We just can't. Like we're unable to see all of that data during a modeling process. We can't. It's just but what we're saying is that even with that limitation, we can still produce superior outputs. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true. I don't know how it could be true. So I would welcome debates on this. Maybe I could get Juan Cicada back on the podcast, because he's one of the smartest people I know, and he's an advocate for kind of human-driven data modeling, I believe. Joe Reese and I talked about this a little bit on the podcast episode that published yesterday. So there certainly are smart people in this space, much smarter than me, to talk about it, but I'm not entirely sure data modeling is something uniquely, optimized for human engagement and involvement and ownership. I don't know. I don't think so. What else was at the conference? I think we touched on it. Well, same old. Governance, blocking, tackling, fundamental stuff, getting your hands around data governance. And again, this has been a recurring theme, right? There is all of this stuff out here, semantic layers and graph and AI, transformational stuff. It's going to take some time to get there. Don't get me wrong. It's going to take some time to get there. And then there's the basic blocking and tackling, right? Where, for example, the second keynote of the second day was, again, a presentation largely about how important it is to focus on business outcomes. The idea that we need to keep reinforcing that, to me, is problematic, right? The idea that we need to keep enforcing, hey, focus on outcomes, right? And not tools. Trust me, I just spend a lot of time talking about technologies and tools. I get it. But if you follow me and if you follow the content and if you go watch the podcast and if you consume the stuff I'm saying on LinkedIn, outcomes. I'm that guy. I'm pounding that drum as best that I can. But the idea that we need to continue to kind of wave that flag and saying, hey, folks, don't forget outcomes. Yeah, it's problematic, right? Like I don't know. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but I do know, excuse me, but I do know that we still struggle with, let's just call it some of the basics, right? Where do I start in a governance initiative? How do I quantify the value of an investment in data and analytics? Do I do MDM before I do a data catalog? I'm focused on a data catalog, but I'm not focused on just a lot of the kind of the basic stuff. And again, I think this is a function of so many new people in the space, but it's also a function of the thought leaders in the space not evolving fast enough. I don't think. So. I know I'm guilty of talking a lot about shiny objects. I know that I'm guilty about talking about future state, but you're going to see a blog post from me next week that is an extension of something that I posted a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn. It's this idea of something I'm calling modern data leadership. So hopefully you, as my listeners, subscribers, my community, our community, hopefully you're seeing that this thought leader, or whatever you want to call me. I know there's some people, like my friend Laura Madsen is probably, if she's watching, cringing because she hates the phrase thought leader. There are other influencers. I hate that one. That's not good. I don't know. Experts. There are experts like me that are trying to desperately break away from the same old. This is my raison d'etre. This is my thing, my reason to be. I just finished reading Jordan Morrow's book for a second time, the Be Data Literate book. And in his last chapter, he talks about find your why. My why is extending CDO tenures. Hard stop. That's my why. And a big part of the fact that their tenures are low is that we keep doing the same things over and over and again and expecting different results. And I'm here to break that. I'm going to break some stuff. So thanks, Dan, Ron, Andreas, everybody else for attending. We got 2 minutes. I'll probably end up here. We did have an amazing, I should have touched on this. Shame on me. We had an amazing event last week. Prophecy did. It was our Data Hero Summit. It was our first ever kind of customer event, kind of, first industry / customer event. And we did a whole day of presentations on all the things that I talk about day in and day out. And I know that we'll be presenting a lot of that content through prophecy.com. So we had conversations with some of our biggest customers, including Nestle Purina, how, Nestle is solving for MDM challenges. We had some other amazing customers that we talked to. We had people like me talking about MDM and governance. So there'll be a whole bunch of resources out there on prophecy.com if we haven't already published them, but stay tuned. I will continue to do this. I will continue to have this live event every month. I will continue to publish podcasts. I'll continue to go to speaking events. I'll continue to speak on LinkedIn as loud as I can. Thank you for your support, everybody. Thank you for listening. I will see you in another month or maybe next week in Chicago or Toronto. Thanks all. Bye.